What's up, guys? Today we're going to walk through an installation of our brand new CTA full guard front bumper. This is for the 23 and up Ford Super Duty. It's an all steel heavy duty unit, although it comes in at under 200 pounds. It's winch ready. It has a 2-inch receiver for your accessories. It's compatible with all your sensors and camera. And you can run the OEM fog lights or a pair of the LED pod lights. Let's check it out. Once you unbox it, this is what you'll have. These big beefy frame brackets, one for each side, all the hardware necessary for installation, which we'll go through in detail, step by step. On the fog lights, I mentioned you can run your OEM lights, and that's what we're going to do today. They'll install into this bracket, which fills this void here. If you don't have or don't want to use OEM fog lights, you can run a pair of the little square LED pods, in which case this bracket would bolt in there. This particular truck doesn't have the parking sensors or the adaptive cruise radar, but just in case yours does, I'll start with the parking sensors. Pre-installed, you'll have these parking sensor housings. Your sensor will pop into that hole. Actually, let me back up. You'll take this ring, this little foam ring, and put it around the very front of the sensor, then pop the sensor into the hole. Then on the back of the sensor, you'll use this thick foam semicircle, and it will snap over the back of this. It'll snap on really firm and hold the sensor in place. If you don't have the sensor, which is the case today, you'll use these little round deletes, and they just snap into the hole, and it gives the appearance of a sensor. If you have the adaptive cruise radar, the little sensor, the little square sensor, it'll bolt to the inside of this bracket, and this bracket and this housing will replace this screen. So it'll all bolt together there using these small but long bolts. Also, if you have the parking sensors, you'll get a couple of these wiring extensions in case the harness isn't quite long enough to reach the new sensor's location. We've also included some zip ties for convenience. Let's get started. We're going to start by disconnecting this main wiring plug. It's on the inside of the driver's side frame rail. Remove this plastic cover. Make sure to only grab one layer. You can feel there's kind of two here, but we're just going to grab the outer layer and pop it off straight forwards. 18 millimeter on these 4 bolts. You don't need a wrench on the back side. Above the tow hook on each side, there's a little plastic Christmas tree. If the Christmas tree itself doesn't come out, you can remove the piece of rubber from around the Christmas tree and get it later. As you take it off, if you have a block heater, you'll need to remove the little clips that hold the block heater to the bumper. Now grab a buddy and set it off. Use an 18 millimeter to remove these. There's 4 sets of them. Keep that hardware. We're going to remove but keep these tow hooks. It's at 18 millimeter. If you're going to reuse your fog lights, we have to disassemble some stuff to get to them. We're going to take these out with a 15. A T25 for these 4. And then just remove the clips that hold the wiring harness in place. First thing we're going to do is install the frame mounts on the truck. Now we've already got the bumper removed, and I've unclipped any wiring or any little extra clips from the side of the frame. So these 3/8 steel brackets are going to be what goes on first. These are your frame brackets. They bolt to the frame and the bumper bolts to this. They're stamped with a D or a P for driver or passenger. So I've got the driver here. It slips over the end of the frame rail. And then your OEM tow hooks kind of sandwich it in place. And you'll reuse those large bolts that used to hold the tow hooks in. So I'm going to put them in from the bottom and get them all started before I tighten them down. Now for these holes that go through the side of the frame, we've got these flag bolts to make installation easier, so you don't need a backup wrench. So we install those from the inside out. We'll use a flat washer and a lock washer and a nut. We'll do this on the remaining 3 holes and repeat on the other side. I don't know if this is going to be true for every truck, but I noticed on this truck there is no hole in the frame on the passenger side innermost rearward hole for our mount. So don't worry about it. It's not going to affect the strength. You've got plenty other large bolts holding this in place. So on our passenger side, we're putting in 3 out of the 4 side bolts. Go ahead and tighten these all the way down with an 18 millimeter. They were pretty tight. Next, we're going to prep the bumper for installation. So that's any parking sensors, any wiring, the lights, and also the winch. I'm going to start with the OEM fogs. These little bolts, 6 millimeter, they're roughly an inch long or a little less. They have a lock washer and flat kind of pre-installed on them. We're going to use those and these black serrated flange nuts to put the factory fog lights in the bumper. So we'll do that for both sides. Then we'll use the same bolts and these little gold nuts to install this full assembly in the actual bumper, 2 on each side. If you have a winch, now's the time to put it in. Just install it per the manufacturer's instructions, starting with the fair lead first. If you live in a state that requires a front tag, or if you just want to run a front tag, the best way, in my opinion, to do it is use a fair lead license plate mount, and that would sandwich between the fair lead and the front of the bumper. So make sure to put that on now if you have it as you install the fair lead. A quick tip for installing any winch in anything, if it has these little square nuts or the hex nuts that fall out when you install it, after you put the nut in, temporarily cover it up with a piece of tape. Any kind of tape will do. And that way, as you maneuver this thing in there, you don't have to worry about the nut falling out. I recommend leaving the winch bolts loose for now in case you need to shift the winch around as you tighten the bolts down in the bumper during the install. Or maybe even take it out so you can slide the winch all the way left or right so you can get your impact in there. Now it's time to put it on the truck. Make sure your wires aren't anywhere where they're going to be pinched. Grab a helper, preferably 2. It's nice to have a guy on each side to hold the bumper and a third one to put the bolts in. If you're fortunate enough to be working where there's a lift, that's a great way to do it, or even a lift cart that goes up and down, or just a jack on the floor, just anything that can help. So basically we're just going to line this up and let it rest on the frame mounts as we get our hardware and then get a couple bolts started so it's safe. In this particular instance, my frame mounts are a little too close together. So to get it started, I'm going to loosen the first bolts that we tightened down on the frame mounts. I'll get the bumper started and then I'll tighten these back down. On each side, there are 6 bolts, 3 on the inside of the frame, 3 on the outside of the frame. The only one you can really see in the video is this one right here. So I've got a washer on the bolt, then on the nut side we're going to do a washer, a lock washer, and a nut. We're going to get all 12 bolts started before we do any adjustments. we've got all the bolts in, none of them are tight yet, and now we're just leveling the bumper up, making sure it's rotated frontwards, rearwards. I like to go for about a 1/2 inch gap back here where it matters. If you go any tighter, you run the risk of the bumper colliding with the fender if you're ever off-road in a flex situation, and much more than that, and I think it just looks like too much of a gap. So we're going to tighten down the easiest bolts to get to, make sure we still like it, then we'll tighten down the rest of them. That's it. We tightened down all the bolts, double checked that. We double checked that the adjustment's where we want it. We tightened down the winch, zip tied up all the wires. If you guys have any questions, reach out to us at chandlertruckaccessories.com.